Aaron Rodgers notices a struggling young fan. His unexpected gesture changes a life forever. Aaron Rodgers had met thousands of fans in his career, but today one boy stood out. At a charity event, Rodgers was signing autographs when he noticed a young boy standing at the edge of the crowd. The kid wasn't holding out a football or a jersey like the others. Instead, he clutched a crumpled piece of paper, his hands shaking slightly. Rodgers motioned for him to come closer. The boy hesitated, then slowly stepped forward. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Mr. Rodgers, can you sign this?" Rodgers took the paper and looked at it. It wasn't a trading card or a glossy picture. It was a hospital bill, a staggering amount printed in bold letters. Rodgers glanced back at the boy, who quickly wiped his eyes. "My mom says it's okay," the boy muttered. "She says we'll figure it out, but I heard her crying last night." Rodgers' grip on the paper tightened. He had seen tough situations before, but this was different. The crowd continued cheering, unaware of what was happening. Rodgers kneeled down to meet the boy's eyes. "What's your name?" "Lucas," the boy whispered. Rodgers nodded, his mind already racing. Lucas had come here for more than just an autograph. He had come here hoping for a miracle, and he had no idea that Aaron Rodgers was about to give him one. Aaron Rodgers looked at Lucas, then back at the hospital bill in his hand. The numbers on the page weren't just numbers. They were a weight that no child should have to carry. Rodgers took a deep breath. "How old are you, Lucas?" 10, the boy said quietly. "My mom works a lot, but the bills keep coming. I just wanted to ask if you could sign it, so I can show her something good happened today." Rodgers felt something tighten in his chest. A child shouldn't have to worry about medical bills. He looked around, then lowered his voice. "Listen, Lucas, I need you to do something for me, okay?" Lucas nodded quickly. Rodgers pulled out a notepad from the table and wrote something down. He folded the paper and placed it in Lucas's hand. "That's my team's contact. I want your mom to call this number first thing tomorrow." Lucas looked confused. "Why?" Rodgers smiled. "Because we're going to help." Lucas's eyes widened. "Really?" Rodgers nodded. "Really?" Lucas clenched the paper in his fist as if it were the most valuable thing in the world. "Thank you, Mr. Rodgers." Rodgers gave him a fist bump. "Call me Aaron." Lucas smiled for the first time that day. As Lucas stepped away, Rodgers stood up, already making a mental list of what needed to happen next. He had the resources to change this kid's life, and he wasn't about to let this moment pass. The crowd still cheered, cameras still flashed, but for Rodgers, none of that mattered. Because at that moment, he wasn't just a football player. He was about to be someone's miracle. Aaron Rodgers watched as Lucas disappeared into the crowd, still gripping the note tightly. But Rodgers wasn't done yet. That night, back at his hotel, he picked up his phone and made a call. "Hey, I need you to do me a favor," he said. "There's a kid named Lucas. His mom is struggling with medical bills. I need to know everything hospital costs, what they owe." The next morning, Rodgers' team had all the details. Lucas's mom, Sarah Carter, was a single mother working 2 jobs while trying to pay off over $100,000 in medical debt. Lucas had battled a rare illness, and though he was doing better, the financial strain was crushing them. Rodgers didn't hesitate. "How fast can we take care of it?" His assistant paused. "You're sure about this?" Rodgers didn't blink. "Absolutely." Within hours, the payments were set in motion. The debt that had been weighing on Lucas and his mother for years was about to be erased. Later that day, Rodgers got a message Lucas's mom had called the number. When Sarah answered, her voice was hesitant. "I'm sorry, but I think there's a mistake." "Someone from your team called and said," Rodgers interrupted with a smile in his voice. "It's not a mistake, Sarah. Your debt, it's gone." Silence. Then, a sharp inhale. "What?" Rodgers chuckled. "Consider it taken care of." Sarah's voice cracked. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Rodgers said. "Just give Lucas a hug for me." On the other end of the line, Sarah broke down in tears. And at that moment, Rodgers knew he had just changed their lives forever. Sarah Carter sat on the edge of her couch, clutching the phone tightly, her hands trembling. "I don't understand," she whispered. You just paid it all? Just like that?" On the other end, Aaron Rodgers smiled. Just like that. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. For years, she had juggled 2 jobs, working late shifts, skipping meals, doing everything she could to keep their heads above water. But no matter how hard she tried, the hospital bills had never stopped piling up. It felt like an endless battle loan she had been losing, and now, with just one phone call, it was over. "I don't even know how to thank you," she said, her voice shaking. "You don't have to," Rodgers replied. "Lucas is a great kid. He's strong. And kids like him deserve to just be kids, not worry about hospital bills." Sarah wiped her tears, trying to process what was happening. How did you even know?" Rodgers chuckled. "Lucas told me." Sarah let out a shaky laugh. "That boy worried about me. He's been trying to help, in his own way." "Well, now he doesn't have to," Rodgers said. "From today on, you're debt-free. Focus on him. Focus on the future." Sarah covered her mouth as another wave of emotion hit. She had spent years believing no one cared, that she was alone in this fight. But she wasn't. "Can I ask you for one more favor?" Rodgers added. "Anything," Sarah said without hesitation. "Tell Lucas I expect to see him at a game this season," Rodgers said. "My treat." Sarah let out a sob, overwhelmed by everything. "You really are something else, Aaron." Rodgers smiled. "Just a guy trying to do the right thing." When Sarah hung up, she walked into the living room where Lucas was sitting, still holding the crumpled paper Rodgers had signed. His eyes widened when he saw her tears. "Mom, what's wrong?" Sarah knelt down, pulling him into a tight hug. "Nothing's wrong, baby. Everything is finally right." Lucas blinked. "Did he help?" Sarah nodded, unable to stop smiling through her tears. "More than you'll ever know." At that moment, Lucas knew his hero hadn't just changed his life. He had saved it. Lucas sat frozen for a moment, his young mind trying to grasp what his mother had just told him. The hospital bills gone, the stress, the late-night tears, the constant worry over. His hands tightened around the paper Rodgers had signed, his eyes filling with tears. "Mom, he really did that?" Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. "Yes, baby, he really did." Lucas couldn't believe it. He had come to that charity event hoping for a simple autograph, maybe a moment to remember. But Aaron Rodgers had given him so much more. A few days later, Sarah's phone rang again. It was Rodgers' team. "We're sending over tickets for this Sunday's game," the assistant said. "Lucas and you will have VIP access. Rodgers wants to make sure Lucas gets the full experience." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "You don't have to do all this." "We want to," the assistant interrupted warmly. "Aaron insists." That Sunday, Lucas arrived at the stadium with his mother, both of them still in disbelief. A staff member led them through a private entrance, past security, past the crowds, into a luxury suite overlooking the field. Lucas's eyes went wide. He had never seen anything like it. Then, the door opened. Aaron Rodgers walked in, wearing his warm-up gear, helmet in hand. Lucas froze. You're really here?" Rodgers grinned. "Of course I am, buddy. Told you I'd see you at a game." Lucas stared at him, his hands shaking. Then, without thinking, he rushed forward and hugged him. Rodgers laughed, patting his back. "You ready to see how this game is played up close?" Rodgers asked. Lucas nodded furiously. "Yes." Rodgers handed him a special jersey. "Got one more thing for you, custom made, just for you." Lucas unfolded it. On the back, it said, "Lucas number 12, Rodgers' own number." His eyes filled with tears again. He looked up at Rodgers, his voice small. "Why did you do all this?" Rodgers knelt down to meet his eyes. "Because when I was a kid, I had people who believed in me. Now it's my turn to believe in someone else." Lucas hugged the jersey to his chest. He had walked into that stadium as just another fan, but now he felt like he belonged. Lucas held the custom jersey against his chest, gripping it like it was the most valuable thing he had ever owned. His eyes were wide, still in disbelief that all of this was real. Aaron Rodgers chuckled, ruffling Lucas's hair. "All right, buddy, let's get you to the field." Lucas gasped. "The field?" Rodgers grinned. "You didn't think I'd let you sit in the stands the whole time, did you?" Lucas turned to his mom, who was smiling through her teeth. She nodded, encouraging him to go. A staff member escorted Sarah to a reserved seating area, while Rodgers took Lucas by the hand and led him through the tunnels of the stadium. As they stepped onto the field, Lucas's heart pounded. The bright lights, the massive stadium, the roar of the crowd, it was overwhelming. Rodgers handed him a football. "Think you got an arm on you?" Lucas's hands shook as he held the ball. He looked up at Rodgers nervously. "Two don't know." Rodgers knelt beside him. "Hey, you don't have to be perfect. Just give it your best shot." Lucas nodded, taking a deep breath. He gripped the football tightly, pulled his arm back, threw it as hard as he could. The ball spiraled through the air, not perfect, but not bad for a 10-year-old. It landed a few yards away, and Lucas turned to Rodgers, worried he had disappointed him. But Rodgers was grinning. "That was solid, kid. You ever played before?" Lucas shook his head. "Number I always wanted to, but my mom couldn't afford it." Rodgers' smile faded slightly. He could see the truth behind those words. He had met so many kids like Lucas talented, eager, full of dreams but held back by circumstances beyond their control. Rodgers took a deep breath. "That's about to change." Lucas frowned. "What do you mean?" Rodgers turned to a nearby staff member and gave a small nod. The man disappeared into the tunnel and returned a moment later, holding a clipboard. "Lucas," Rodgers said, handing it to him, "this is a full scholarship to one of the best youth football programs in the state. You won't have to pay a dime. Training, gear, coaching, everything is covered." Lucas's hands shook as he stared at the paper. His lips parted, but no words came out. His dream own he had never even dared to speak out loud was suddenly right in front of him. His eyes filled with tears. "Are you serious?" Rodgers smiled. "Dead serious." Lucas wiped his face quickly. "But why?" Rodgers placed a hand on his shoulder. "Because I sing in you, Lucas, and I know if someone just gives you a chance, you're going to do something amazing." Lucas hugged him without hesitation. "Thank you," he whispered. Rodgers squeezed his shoulder. "You just promised me one thing, all right?" Lucas looked up. "What?" Rodgers grinned. "That when you get older and make it big, you do the same for someone else." Lucas nodded furiously. "I will. I promise." The two of them stood there for a moment, the stadium buzzing around them. But Lucas didn't hear the noise. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just hoping for a future. He actually had one. Lucas still clutched the scholarship paper in his hands, his fingers gripping it tightly like he was afraid it might disappear. His mind was racing. Just though he was worried about hospital bills, watching his mom struggle, wondering if life would ever get easier. And now he was standing on an NFL field with Aaron Rodgers, being handed a chance most kids could only dream of. Rodgers knelt down to his level, his voice calm but serious. "Lucas, this isn't just a piece of paper. This is your future. You're going to have coaches, training, real competition. But most importantly, you're going to have a shot." Lucas's lip quivered. "I've never played football before." Rodgers smiled. "Neither had I when I was your age, but I worked for it. And now I get to play in front of millions of people." Lucas swallowed hard. "What if I'm not good enough?" Rodgers put a hand on his shoulder. "You ever hear what they said about me before I got to the NFL?" Lucas shook his head. Rodgers chuckled. "They said I wasn't tall enough, wasn't strong enough, didn't have the leadership skills. I didn't even get a scholarship offer out of high school. I had to fight for every opportunity. And you know what? I proved them wrong." Lucas stared at him, his heart pounding. "You don't have to be the best right away," Rodgers continued. "You just have to start. Show up. Give it your all. The rest will take care of itself." Lucas inhaled sharply and nodded. Okay, Rodgers grinned. That's what I like to hear. Just then, one of the Green Bay Packers coaches walked onto the field, holding a football. Rodgers, we need you for warm-ups. Rodgers stood up and patted Lucas's head. Time for me to get to work. He turned to one of the staff members. Make sure Lucas and his mom have everything they need. Before walking away, Rodgers looked at Lucas one last time. Hey, Lucas. Lucas looked up. Rodgers tossed him the football in his hands. Keep practicing that throw, all right? Lucas caught it, holding it like a prized possession. He didn't need to say anything, his smile said it all. As Rodgers jogged toward his teammates, Lucas turned to his mom. His excitement bubbled over. Mom, can you believe this? Sarah wiped her tears and pulled him close. I can, because you deserve this, sweetheart. Lucas grinned, gripping the football tightly, and in that moment, for the first time in his life, he believed it too. Lucas sat in the stands with his mother, still clutching the football Aaron Rodgers had given him. The roar of the stadium, the bright lights, and the energy of the crowd made it all feel surreal. Just days ago, he had been another struggling kid, worried about things no child should have to think about. But now, everything had changed. On the field, Rodgers took his place behind center. Lucas watched closely, hanging onto every movement. The ball snapped, Rodgers dropped back, scanned the field, and fired a perfect pass to his receiver. The crowd erupted. Lucas couldn't stop smiling. He wanted to be that someday. He wanted to feel what it was like. To step onto that field not as a fan, but as a player. He looked up at his mom. Do you think I can really do it? Sarah smiled, brushing his hair back. I think you can do anything. Lucas nodded, his grip tightening on the football. I'm going to work hard, just like Aaron said. At that moment, he wasn't just a kid with a dream. He was a kid with a plan. Lucas's story is a reminder that one act of kindness can change a life forever. We all have the power to help someone, to give them hope, to push them toward their dreams. Sometimes all it takes is believing in them. So ask yourself who in your life needs that encouragement, who needs a helping hand. Because just like Aaron Rodgers did for Lucas, you might be the person who changes someone's future forever.